When I was in seminary, I had a professor of music and liturgy, and she had a requirement for everyone. That requirement was that you had to sing the service. Everyone had to do it. There were no exceptions. It was basically the one thing everyone had to do to make sure they passed the class. Now, for about 10% of the people, that was super easy. They had musical training and musical background, and they could knock it out without even thinking about it. For another 10, maybe 15%, this was something that, well, they could do, but they were a little nervous about because they wanted to make sure they did it well. For the other 80%, and I include myself in that, this was abjectly terrifying because singing in front of a whole group of your peers and honking this out was really not the greatest option in the world. What we didn't realize, we thought the worst thing was singing in front of our peers. What we discovered was the commentary as a result was often worse. That is, there were three options for how our professor would grade us. She would either just joyfully effuse over how wonderfully the piece was and how well we had sung it. The second option was you did a wonderful job and with a comment or two about how you could improve. And then there was the third option. It was the dreaded option, but it was probably the most realistic, when she would just sort of smile and say, "Well, you sure did that." It was a horrible thing to hear, but of course we all at the same time would all laugh because well, you got through it, you passed, but you sure did that. In so many ways, I think for 2020, that's what most of us have in our head. We got through this year somehow. We don't know really what happened, what we were doing, and well, we sure did that. The funny thing is, I know that's exactly what I was thinking for those first few weeks as we decided to try and go online. Well, we didn't decide. We had no choice. Everything was closed. So we got out our iPhones and set them up with stands that really weren't even set up for iPhones. We didn't even have an iPhone stand in the church those first days. And we would just do the best we could, hitting record and going live on Facebook, trying to reach out. They were not the most perfect or elegant of services. Far cry from what we do now. And all we could really say was, well, we got that taken care of. We did those services. We did this. We took care of this. And at the end, we just sort of go, well, we sure did that. And really, I've heard a million commentaries that basically say the same thing about the last year. That was a dumpster fire. Man, that was a mess. I don't know what I did. I don't know what happened. Whew, that was a hard season. None of them really as much fun as we sure did that. Usually profanity trickled in there as much as anything, and what a mess. Here's the thing, as we look at the last year, it's easy to sort of look at the negatives, and there are plenty of negatives, especially in this last couple of months. For the first 6 or 8 months of this pandemic, we didn't have many people who got COVID in our community. We were blessed to be able to shelter in place. We only had 1 or 2 people who would occasionally get it, and then it was sort of a head cold and they didn't feel good. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen really some incredibly poignant and difficult deaths in our community. People who were beloved and will be sorely missed. Really, a generation of folks in their 90s that literally built this community. We have people like Joan Stratton and Betty Bull and Carl Perkle. People we all know and love and will miss in so many ways. And we focus on those things, it has been a hard year. And it's even harder because we can't gather to celebrate their lives and their witness and ministry. We can't share in our grief and our frustration, our sorrow, our anger, our fear. And if you focus just on that, then it's super easy to say we barely got by. We barely squeaked through the door. But as I really take stock of what's happened in the last 9 to 10 months, while those first weeks and months were hard, and really the whole process has been one challenge after another, what I can say unequivocally is we've actually done pretty well. Amazingly well. I'm going to start with one simple statement as we talk about the past year, and that is this: Holy Innocents, you should be proud of your staff. They have done an amazing job with incredibly difficult processes, learning whole new systems, and figuring out how to be the church to each other. I'm sure you can notice that just by the way we worship, right? Those first weeks were just one camera on one tripod with no singing and nothing going on. In the last 9 months, we have learned an amazing amount about how to broadcast and how to simulcast and how to produce, how to get better sound and a better process. And for that, we have to thank Sean and the choir and the work that they have done and all the things that they have learned. We went from barely being able to sing to now somehow mixing master tracks and doing all sorts of recordings in all sorts of new ways. The same is true for Jess and Alejandro, who's brand new and just joined us for sound, and Sally, who, when we started the year, had sort of one model of communication. That was, here's the bulletins, here's the emails, here's the highlights. We sort of had this pattern going. And then suddenly we had to learn everything new about, well, how do we do Facebook more and Instagram? And we had those, but suddenly those became the focus and the connective tissue. Renee and Megan turned everything upside down. The youth could not meet, but they figured out 1,000 ways to connect, to engage, to find ways to build our community in Christ. So much so that I started getting calls from other rectors saying, how on earth are y'all doing this? We heard you're doing great work over there. Everything went so well. And on top of that, then you have just the good old-fashioned business of the church. And Camille and Caroline and Melody have kept us running at an amazing level, making sure not just the bills were paid and the lights are turned on, collecting the pledges, but making sure that we thrived. Your staff has done an outstanding job. In the midst of that, your clergy has done the best we could. Kenya and I and Buddy and then now Ruth have all called and written letters and notes and done all sorts of crazy new ways of being clergy. If you'd told me at the beginning of the year my job would basically be to get out my phone and talk on it until the battery died several times a day, I would say that sounds awful, but now I actually sort of enjoy calling and talking to people all day when that's the main task of the moment. That doesn't even get into the amazing number of people who have jumped in and helped and worked in amazing different ways. And if I start to list them, I'll forget someone and get in trouble. But I'm going to try and list some. Our AV club, that is Chris Devine, Chris Protos, and Bill Aaron, literally helped us revamp everything we're doing. Susan and Dan Falk and Mary Vaughn contributed greatly in terms of funds and resources so that we could buy new cameras, we could begin this process of rejuvenating and rebuilding our technology, a process that we hope in the next week or two will be finally complete so we can record in the church and see that sacred space in our lives again. Even more, we're working on rebuilding our website, brand, logo, and I know this is one of the things that frustrates all of you the most. Our giving platform finally will have a nice, smooth, easy way to give to the church. Although my personal favorite in the last few weeks, for stewardship, we have a list of names, people who contributed and pledged last year, and then there are people who have pledged this year, and there's always a handful that haven't pledged, and we had one name that none of us really knew. So we called, and finally we got in touch with this family who said, oh, we're members of Holy Innocents in Florida. We accidentally pledged on your site last year. We meant to pledge at our own this year. That's how wonky all of this can sometimes be. It's easy when we look at the hard stuff that's happened in the last year to say, well, we barely got by. We sure did that. But really, the reality is we've excelled. The Altar Guild, the Flower Guild, the Community of Hope, there's so many groups, and parts of our community that have just jumped in and taken time to make sure everything happens and happens well. And the results are amazing. Not just in terms of what this particular Sunday looks like, but we have a budget surplus, which for most parishes is not even a vague possibility this year. We have all sorts of new ways of reaching out, and we're learning more each and every day. The production values have gone way up. But here's the key, and this is the truly breathtaking one. Last year, for all of our services, that is for Sunday services, for midday services, for funerals, for weddings, for all of those services last year, our total attendance was 24,623 people. It's a pretty nice group, nice footprint for our community. This year, for Facebook only, so the people who have watched our services, and these are only Sunday services and our morning prayer each day, total 54,026. That's a 126% increase in the way we have reached people this year. So it's easy to say, oh, it was hard, and it has been a hard year because we haven't been physically present, but we have suddenly reached out to so many more and connected with so many more people and more consistently, and in many ways, more often. And we aren't bound by geography in quite the same way. We have people that we used to be members here that can watch us now and engage and see this community again, and they're joyful. And we get emails all the time and phone calls about how joyful it is to be connected. And if there's something I think that we can think about in the last year, it's just that God has been present with us in this change and transition and difficult time. It's been hard, but we've also found new ways to be church with each other. We found new ways to connect and grow as a community, and we have grown. We have new members. We have new families. We even have a couple of new babies. It's joyful and amazing that in the midst of all of this, life goes on and we flourish. Now, I should say, the one person that I didn't mention in all of that was John Porter. We all love John, and his daily commentary on Facebook is a hilarious and joyful part of many of our days. But I should also say that out of that 54,000 views, John alone, when he did his Thursdays with John, had 4,000 views on top of that 54. But not all of us can be as popular as John, after all. It's amazing to see the different ways we have reached out, that we have grown as a community, even as we've had to slog through. And so we can say, in that sort of condescending tone like my teacher had, well, we sure did that. But I think we did more. We grew. We flourished. We rejoiced because God was with us. God went into exile with us, went into these desert places with us. I have more stories than I can count about how God has been with families in hard times in these moments, or just there's been finally enough quiet to hear God when you're at home, when you have a chance to read and be with family and friends in new ways. So my friends, how is Holy Innocents? We are doing great. And I can say with all joy and exultation that God is with us, and that with God, we sure did that. And we did it amazingly. Thank you for all you've done to help this community grow. Thank you for all that you continue to do. God bless you, and my friends, we sure did that. Amen.